Welcome to Biology 206, Introductory Biology 3. In Lecture 1, we will be reviewing some important topics that you will need to be familiar with this quarter. Because this series of courses, by 204, 205, and 206, can be taken out of sequence, some of you may have different levels of preparation for some of the material. Therefore, throughout the course, you may encounter some concepts and terminology that you're not familiar with. When this happens, you should look them up in the other parts of your text. Keep in mind that the glossary can be a fantastic place for clearing up some of these definitions as well. The assigned portion of Chapter 1 in your How Life Works textbook has a good summary of concepts that you will need to understand for this course. In this series of slides, I will go over the process of science and natural selection, but I expect you to review the other assigned parts of Chapter 1. On this slide is a diagram of the overall process of science, which is traditionally referred to as the scientific method. Nowadays, when we discuss the process of science, many biologists and educators prefer terms such as scientific inquiry, because the word method suggests that every scientist follows this diagram from start to finish. In reality, many scientists begin their inquiry at different points along this diagram, developing hypotheses from observations published by others, developing experiments to test hypotheses developed by others, and so on. You may find it helpful to think of this methodological process as a cycle that allows for further refinement as more exploration, investigation, and communication occurs through time. As an example, the introductory slide showed a penguin perched on ice. You could make the observation that the penguin's feet are bare, lacking feathers or hair. Humans standing barefoot in such conditions would experience frostbite within minutes. So how do penguins keep their feet from similarly freezing? You could then propose a tentative explanation for your observations and this question. Such a proposed explanation is called a hypothesis. A good hypothesis allows you to make predictions about observations not yet made or experiments not yet run. Scientifically valid predictions can be tested. For instance, you could hypothesize that penguins use their feathered bodies to provide warmth to their feet. A prediction that could be formulated from this hypothesis is that if penguins use their feathered bodies to provide warmth, then they will routinely tuck their feet under their feathers. If you performed an observational experiment at an aquarium or zoo, you would see that your results do not necessarily fit predictions. Penguins spend a great deal of time actively walking around icy surfaces with their feet fully exposed. Well, the actual mechanism for preventing frostbite in penguin feet is a series of veins and arteries throughout the feet that transfer body heat efficiently enough to maintain foot temperature a few degrees above freezing. Once a general hypothesis, such as evolution by natural selection, has been supported by a large body of experiments and observations, it can become a theory. Note that in general conversation, the term theory is often synonymous with hypothesis, but in science, the word theory is essentially synonymous with the word fact. So let's put the scientific method into practice. Another compelling example of the scientific method that your book describes has to do with hypotheses regarding the extinction of the dinosaurs. We start with an observation. Iridium, which is a common component of meteorites, has been found in rock layers that correspond to the time of the extinction of dinosaurs. A hypothesis was developed in the 1970s based off these observations about meteorite composition that essentially a large meteorite the size of Mount Everest disrupted communities on land and in the sea 65 million years ago. This meteorite left a strong iridium trace and caused the extinction of the dinosaurs. If this hypothesis aligned with actual events, we could predict that independent evidence of a meteor strike should be found in the rock layers corresponding to the time of extinction, and they should be rare or absent in older and younger layers. Two further observations were then made. First, the kind of quartz crystals that are found in places struck by meteors have been found in layers dated to the time of dinosaur extinction. Second, researchers also found a crater in the Yucatan Peninsula on the east coast of Mexico that was roughly the correct size and age for the hypothesized meteor. Thus, many scientists now conclude that a large meteor caused the extinction of the dinosaurs. There are other hypotheses that are still plausible, however. The question and observations we discussed in the penguin example highlight two ways in which we can think about biological organisms. Anatomy is the study of the form of an organism's body. It answers the question of, how is an organism built? Physiology, which is the main focus of this Bio 206 course, is the study of the function of all of the components of an organism's body and answers the question, how does an organism's body work? As you'll see as we proceed with the course, form and function in plants and animals are closely correlated. We can see a nice example of this match of form to the environment when we look at the fusiform shape of fast-swimming aquatic animals, such as a shark and a dolphin. The torpedo shape is most efficient for a swimmer that needs to move quickly through the water, which is why sharks and dolphins are so alike in shape, even though they're not closely related. In fact, the ancestors of dolphins were land mammals that had a very different body shape. Millions of years of natural selection led to dolphins looking like sharks because it is the most efficient shape for moving quickly through their shared environment. Let's briefly review how natural selection works. We can observe that many traits may vary within a population of organisms. When that variation can be inherited, that is, there is a genetic basis to those traits that allows those traits to be passed to the next generation, then the variants best able to grow and reproduce in a particular environment will contribute disproportionately to the next generation, leading to a change in the population over time. This population-wide shift in the frequencies of heritable traits over time is termed evolution. Referring to our previous example, the evidence for natural selection acting on the shapes of dolphins can be found in the fossil record. We can actually find examples of this happening much more recently. Stickleback fish are found in both the marine environment and in freshwater lakes and streams. Marine populations spend most of their lives in the sea, but then return to rivers in order to breed. There are many populations of sticklebacks that live in small lakes in Canada on land that was covered in glaciers 12,000 years ago. So, scientists know each one of these lakes was independently colonized by marine sticklebacks within the past 12,000 years. The environment of these isolated freshwater lakes is quite different than the open ocean, and most of the lake populations have evolved to be different from the marine sticklebacks in similar ways. A group of researchers led by Schluter compared body shape of 15 freshwater stickleback populations in 15 different lakes to 2 stickleback populations living in the ocean. The dark arrows indicate the direction of evolved differences between the freshwater populations and the ocean populations. The dotted lines indicate structures that are absent or greatly reduced in freshwater populations. In general, the lake populations had jaws that rotated downward, gills that moved backward, eyes shifted forward and upward, and reduced defensive armor. The hypothesized driving force between this independent evolution of body shape in all of these lakes is that natural selection is different on ocean populations than on lake populations. In the small freshwater lakes, there is less predation from birds and other fish, and there is greater threat of predation from aquatic insects. There is also an available benthic zone in the lakes, which is much less available in the deep ocean. This bottom habitat offers an abundance of invertebrate prey for these fish living in the lakes. So, stickleback morphology has been modified by natural selection to better fit their new environment in the freshwater lakes, and this has happened independently in approximately 200 different lakes in Canada.